UFC Fight Island 6 is in the books. We saw several fighters stepping up their game and dominating their opponents. We saw a light heavyweight proving himself to be a part of the next chapter of the division. And we saw 2 fighters put themselves in a position to fight for the belt. We also saw 7 of 11 fights go to decision, but most of them were pretty good. Well, let's get into it. Here's my real winners and losers of UFC Fight Island 6. First fight of the night is a bantamweight bout between Said Nurmagomedov and Mark Striegel. Nurmagomedov wins this one by a first round KO. Said took care of the UFC newcomer in only 51 seconds. He caught him with a short hook that put Striegel down and followed up with some of the nastiest ground and pound. He hit him clean like 5 or 6 times on the ground in one of those instances where the fallen is knocked in and out of consciousness a few times before the ref can step in. Said is, of course, one of the many UFCers representing and making Dagestan proud. But he's the other type of Dagestani product. Most are very Khabib-ish in their fight style, but a few of them, Said included, are more the striking type. He had that spinning back kick KO of Ricardo Hamas earlier last year, and this marks his 4th career knockout. He's 3-1 in UFC competition and looking good. Said Nurmagomedov, big winner. Next up is a light heavyweight bout between Gadzhimurad Antigulov and Maxim Grisham. Grisham wins this one by a second round TKO. This was kind of a dumb stoppage with only 2 seconds left in the round, in my opinion a little too early. It seemed to me that Antigulov was still throwing and really wasn't badly damaged. But Grisham did keep the pressure on when he heard the referee warning Antigulov to fight back, so I definitely can't fault him for that. Too often we see a fighter hurt their opponent and not pile on the strikes. There have been so many instances of fights that could have been finished if the one on top just kept the punches coming until the referee steps in, but instead eased off and let the fight continue. You've got to play the game, and appeasing the ref is part of it. Antigulov didn't do that. I feel for him, but when he heard the referee calling the fight back, he should have quit covering up and started throwing. Maybe there was an issue with the language barrier. Maybe he thought the referee would let it last 2 more seconds to the end of the round, but Antigulov should have been a bit smarter. I mean, I feel for him, but when you're on a 3-fight losing streak, you just got to be more proactive. So Antigulov drops his 4th in a row, and he's gotten finished in each one of them. And now we got to wonder if he's going to have a place in the UFC roster much longer. On such a long skid, and now sitting at 2-4 in the UFC, we've got to call Gadzhimurad Antigulov a big loser. And although I do take exception with a win in this fashion, Grisham did look pretty good. He's back in the right weight class, he played the game the right way, and he gets his first UFC win. With so many things going the right way, he's going to make my list. Maxim Grisham, big winner. Next up is a lightweight bout between Jamey Malarkey and Fares Ziam. Fares Ziam wins by unanimous decision. I wouldn't call it a robbery, but I did think that Malarkey won. Well, I thought the judges would think he won. Malarkey won the wrestling match and Ziam won the kickboxing match, but the judges usually tend to favor the takedowns. These fighters are both making their sophomore UFC appearance. Both of them lost the first time out. Both of them looked good in this fight. In fact, with 7 decisions on this card, this was one of the more competitive. Ziam gets his first UFC win. He does it as a slight underdog, but most people will likely feel the decision should have gone the other way. With that in mind, I can't call either fighter a real winner, so let's move on. Next up is a middleweight bout between Jun Young Park and John Phillips. Jun Young Park wins this one by unanimous decision, 30-25 on all 3 scorecards. And the judges got this one right, except it probably should have been 30-24. If you were watching this fight and didn't know either of the fighters, then someone told you that one of their nicknames was the Iron Turtle, you wouldn't have thought it was Park. Phillips got a shellacking in this one. If you didn't watch the fight though, you're probably not going to want to. It was completely one-sided and rather slow. So here's a guy who is known for having one-punch power, but is best known for being Hamzat's UFC welcome mat. You'd think he may have learned a thing or two from that demolition job, but here he goes getting snuffed again, and this time by a guy who's only been wrestling for a few months. Phillips moves his UFC record to a pitiful 1-5, and has only landed a handful of strikes in his last 2 fights. Getting completely out-wrestled by a guy that doesn't wrestle, I can't believe he's going to be here for much longer. John Phillips, big loser. On the other side of the octagon, Park gets the win and moves to 2-1 in the UFC. But when you beat a guy for 15 minutes and land nearly 300 shots and the dude doesn't look like he's been in a fight, well, you're not going to make my list. Let's move on. Next up is a women's flyweight bout between number 15 Jillian Robertson and Poliana Boitelho. Jillian Robertson wins by unanimous decision, and this was a much more competitive fight than Park versus Phillips and a much better executed fight than Malarkey versus Zion. This was a classic showdown of the striker versus grappler, with both fighters looking to dictate the pace and adhere to a specific game plan. It always seems like the grappler has the advantage, and that proved true again in this one. It was a good fight, but it did drag a bit here and there, but regardless, Jillian looked good. She moves her UFC record to 6-2 and gets past another dangerous opponent. It hasn't been easy for the Canadian, but she's gotten this far with a certain mixture of confidence and poise that I find encouraging. Prior to her UFC days, she was still fighting UFC caliber opponents, taking on Cynthia Calvillo and Hannah Cyphers even before entering the Ultimate Fighter house. She's been fighting top competition for 4 years or so, and she's getting better with each outing. Poliana Boitelho is a legit fighter in her own right, and Jillian got through her with flying colors. I'm expecting big things from this girl, and I look forward to seeing her again. In fact, in the wake of Cynthia Calvillo having to pull out of her fight this weekend, I say give Jillian the opportunity to step in there with the number 4 ranked Lauren Murphy. I don't know if she's still on the island or if she wants to compete again on such a short turnaround, but if the stars align, I say she's right for the job, and I think she's deserved that chance. Anyway, with a dominant win over another great fighter, this intoxicating redhead is going to make my list. Jillian Robertson, big winner. Next up is a lightweight bout between Matteus Kimrot and Guram Kutateladze. Guram Kutateladze wins by split decision, and this was a good one. Of the 7 decision fights, this was probably the closest and possibly the most entertaining. Another battle between striker and grappler, and this was more even than Robertson and Boitelho. Kimrot landed several takedowns and Guram landed several strikes. Both fighters make their anticipated UFC debuts and look good in the process. Big things are expected here, and I do look forward to seeing each of these guys again. I hope they both get better known opponents in their next efforts, which will help them build a fan base with this North American audience. If played right, the UFC can have a couple of good draws on their hands. But I'm not sure this fight did anyone any favors. Super close with a couple of guys whose names are hard to pronounce. And with neither one really emerging as the true winner, I worry this is the kind of fight that kind of gets lost in memory. A good, entertaining fight, but all things considered, let's move on. There's no real winner here. First fight on the main card is a featherweight bout between Thomas Almeida and Jonathan Martinez. Jonathan Martinez wins by unanimous decision with all scorecards reading 30-27. When Thomas Almeida made his UFC debut in 2014, he was a pretty promising name. He was 17-0 at the time and won his inaugural match by decision and was awarded Fight of the Night honors. Then in 2015, he went on an absolute tear, winning 3 fights in a row by KO and winning Performance of the Night each time out. But that was the pinnacle of his career, and now 2015 seems like a really long time ago. He's gone 1-4 since then, picking up another Performance of the Night in that lone win. So when Almeida wins, he looks really good, and when he loses, it's been to top-tier talent. So now the question is Jonathan Martinez top talent like Garbrandt, Rivera, and Rob Font, or is Almeida's best days just behind him? Unfortunately for Martinez, Almeida has been gone for over 2.5 years, so most will likely assume the latter. And with a split decision loss to Andre Ewell earlier this year, it's going to be hard to argue otherwise. I like Andre Ewell, and I think he has a promising career in front of him, but I don't think he's at the level of those other 3 quite yet. Almeida is only 29. He should have a few good years left in the tank. Maybe he's not washed up just yet and simply got beat by a better fighter, but I think that's an argument that only time can reveal. Jonathan Martinez did look good and definitely handled business. It wasn't a complete demolition job, but he got out to an early lead and he never looked back. He moves his UFC record to 4-2, and I think he did enough to warrant a step up in competition, but he didn't make enough to make my real winners list. So let's move on. Next up is a welterweight bout between Claudio Silva and James Krause. James Krause wins by unanimous decision, 30-27 on all cards. Oh my goodness, this is the 6th decision in a row, and it wasn't very competitive. Krause pretty much had his way with Claudio Silva. Krause is a real veteran of this sport, making his 13th walk to the UFC Octagon and his 36th in total. He has 14 submission wins, so the dude can handle himself on the ground, but he knew that this time out, he would get outclassed on the mat. With 9 of his 14 wins coming by way of submission, Claudio Silva is a beast on the ground. Krause knew that, and he kept the fight standing for the whole 15. He beat Claudio up and kinda made him look like an amateur, which Claudio Silva most definitely is not. Before Saturday night, his only professional loss came in his professional debut, so we can kind of excuse that one. He was 5-0 in the UFC, even beating top contender Leon Edwards amidst that run, and was on a 3-submission streak. Krause breaks that 3-sub streak and the 14-fight winning streak that Silva was enjoying, handing him his first loss in 13 years. Honestly, Krause looked better than ever and fought a smart fight against a smart fighter. Krause's last time out was against Trevin Giles on 1 day's notice and only lost by split decision. A lot of people felt like Krause won that fight, and I find it hard to argue with him. If he had gotten the nod in that one, he'd find himself on a nice tidy 8-fight win streak. At 34 years old, he's getting up there, but he's showing no signs of slowing down. He came into this fight as a slight favorite, but this was a dangerous fight with an opponent that can easily make you look really bad. Considering the fighter he took out and the accolades he stole, the fact that he's 34 years old and 36 fights in, and that he looked as good as he ever has, I've got to call the James Krause a big winner. Next up is a light heavyweight bout between Jimmy Croot and Matteus Pukaskas. Jimmy Croot wins by first round KO in only 2 minutes. Jimmy looked powerful and accurate in this one, landing damaging punches at will. Croot is the better grappler and wrestler. That's an easy one to call, but the stand-up game figured to be much closer. Well, old Jimmy put an end to that argument. He really messed Pukaskas up. He dropped him a few times and put some good ground shots on him too. Croot made his way into the UFC with a TKO win on the Contender Series and has now gone 4-1 in the biggest promotion on earth. And he's finished all 4 of those wins, 2 by submission, 2 by KO. And he's only 24. He's looking better with each fight and starting to look like he could be a contender real soon. You gotta be happy with this kid about now. He'll definitely get a bump up in competition as Matteus just offered no resistance. I say give him a top 15 and see what happens. He breaks Pukaskas' 7-fight win streak and is looking like the leader of the new wave of the light heavies. This division needs some new blood, and it's coming in the form of a 24-year-old Australian, Jimmy Croot, big winner. Next up, we move to the women's flyweight division for number 1 contender Katlyn Chookagian and divisional newcomer Jessica Andrade. Andrade wins by first round TKO. With this win, Jessica becomes the first female to win in 3 different weight divisions. She also becomes the second fighter ever to finish Chookagian, and she also most likely becomes a flyweight contender overnight. Beating the number 1 ranked contender usually does that, right? But beating her by gut punches in the first round is even better. Champion Valentina Shevchenko is scheduled to defend her belt next month, but it seems a pretty good bet that Andrade is going to get the next shot. With only 1 win in the division and not far removed from dropping 2 in a row, the UFC may want to line her up against another contender in the meantime, but I don't find that very likely. She looked so good in this fight and took such little damage that if something happened that forces either Shevchenko or challenger Jennifer Maia out of that November fight, my money says Andrade is going to be the replacement. Jessica walks into the flyweight division ready to claim it as her own, and she's off to a great start. She just may find herself the face of the division sooner rather than later. Jessica Andrade, big winner. For the main event of the night, we move to the featherweight division, where number 2 contender Brian Ortega takes on number 4 Chan Sung Jung. Ortega wins by unanimous decision 50-45 on all 3 scorecards. Ortega gets the win in his comeback fight by dominant fashion, and Zombie is a hard guy to dominate. In all of his previous fights, even the losses, Zombie's looked really good, but he did not look good at all here. Ortega was on his game and beat Zombie in literally every area. I'm not surprised to see Ortega get the win, but I am surprised to see him beat Zombie the way that he did. Zombie didn't look like himself, and maybe that's to Ortega's credit, but I gotta ask myself, how much does the crowd and the energy it brings affect the performances like fighters like Zombie? Regardless, Ortega took care of a very dangerous fighter for 25 minutes. He's back on top and will likely get the next crack at champ Alexander Volkanovski, and I think he's got a pretty good shot at beating him. Aside from Alex's leg kicks, Ortega should be the better stand-up fighter, and if Alex tries for a takedown, he may just end up getting choked out. But that's a video for another time, another event. You see, I'm so excited by Ortega's performance and I'm already wanting to break down his next fight. After that beatdown that Holloway gave him, Ortega needed something big here and he got it. This is his first decision in the UFC, but Zombie is notoriously hard to put away, and it's not like Ortega didn't try. He is redeemed, he is back in the win column, and likely back in the title picture. Brian Ortega, big winner. So there's my real winners and losers of UFC Fight Island 6. It was a good night of fights, and we've got another good one coming up. Khabib and Gaethje, of course, headlined this week's pay-per-view, but there's a lot of interesting fights on this card. We'll have a prediction video for that event posted soon, so check back in for that. Or you could just hit the subscribe button and let YouTube notify you of when that video is available. I mean, that would be easier, right? There were good fights on Saturday, there's good fights coming up. Even in such a screwed up year, it's been a good one to be a fight fan, and it's only going to get better. Till next time.